Hello again, and welcome back to the Animite Tales podcast. We are joined today by, of course, Sam, Alex, and Kane as we talk about bosses in tabletop RPGs, and we will talk about quite a few things to do with them. So, without any further ado, hello!
Hello.
Hey.
Lots of
Hello.
energy today, I like it. So,
Right.
who would like to go first?
Actually, I would like to talk a little bit about something about our experience with bosses in tabletop RPGs and stuff. This phenomenon that I've experienced a few times, not just in our games, but like in other games that I've played, where the mini bosses tend to be a lot harder to defeat than the main bosses.
Okay.
And yeah, and it's like talking a little bit about like mechanics versus story and stuff, and I think it is due to like the mechanics of certain things. Like I think it's like you find things a bit harder to uh defeat when you're like lower level and stuff, and so it's just more difficult to go for the mini bosses. You're more tricky putting them down, and it's just pure luck sometimes. But when you
Well,
actually go up against a big boss,
that's actually what I was
you'll
going
just
to
know what
ask
you're
you,
doing.
because, well, in Animite Tales, the boss and mini boss system is kind of weird because we claim that a mini boss is actually based on strength. Like, if you're at this particular strength level or this particular amount of milestones, this classes as a mini boss under this threat level. Because there's like 5 different threat levels, which is similar to like D&D's challenge rating, except from there's only 5. But when you get to the higher levels, the distinction between enemies and mini bosses are just there's very little limit, because I think it's usually like it's the first set of levels or no levels and then the last level. So it's like, say for instance, like, oh, you need 2 milestones, which is like the equivalent of like 10 levels, and that would be considered a mini boss. Whereas in Animite Tales, we claim the difference between a mini boss and a boss is what's known as arbitrary boss health, where a boss will be given health based on the amount of milestones. So they get 50 health for every milestone that they have. So at the beginning, if they only have 1 milestone, in other words, up to 5 levels in one particular location, like level 5 in powers, level 5 in a trade, a class, whatever, that then means that they would then get 50 health. Now, it's not added on top of their current health, it's just they have 50 health. Now, for every milestone, they get a 50 health. So at the top tier end game point, where the highest amount of milestones they can get is 20, it then means that they end up with 1,000 health. The only difference between a mini boss and a boss is that they get the health, like the special health, and they also get special bonuses, which we've talked about in previous iterations of the updates, where we actually talk about their special abilities. These are special boss effects that grant them like stuff like similar stuff to like legendary resistances. So like they can be immune to certain effects. They can have special effects where it's like they don't need to roll for one thing one time. They can even have it where they can have a unique attribute with less abilities added on to their downside. So they can actually have less downside on unique abilities. Now, on top of this, they also get one last mechanic, which basically, we haven't named this, but the mechanic is pretty much, if a boss has not gotten down to half of its maximum health during its fight, it cannot be knocked out no matter how hard you try, no matter how good you go. No matter even if your power is like, oh, it immediately shuts them off. No. The ability is they are basically immune to being easily cheated out of being defeated. As
Yeah,
soon
I
as
do like that.
Yeah. As soon as they get to 50% or less of the maximum health, you know, have your fill. It's absolutely fine. Well, more power to you. But until then, they are immune to the status ailment of being unconscious, or even having being put into fatal moments. But once it gets below that, they are good to go. The reason for this is because that we wanted bosses to be able to actually feel like they were better and bigger than mini bosses, but also because a lot of the time mini bosses are a lot more optional. Not all the time. Like in modules, they are straight up requirements, and mini bosses are just grant more XP, and they're just a higher challenge rating. But enemies are just usually fodder, as you guys will very much find out. But as of recently, you've actually been fighting bosses one-on-one, and this is the last mechanic in Animite Tales for the bosses system, which is if you fight a boss on its own, 1v1, they actually lose the boss health system, and they actually get their health based on if they were a mini boss or an NPC. That being said, bosses often have this other thing that if you defeat them, not only do you get the maximum rewards for defeating them, you also then get what's known as an accolade, which basically gives you a boon or something like that. It gives you a special ability. And obviously defeating multiple bosses means that you can upgrade the special abilities or just have multiple of them and stuff like that. So there's actual in-game reward, but there's also mechanical rewards as well. You get XP and you get other stuff. But obviously the in-game reward is that you've defeated this big bad. Here's all of their loot, or here's these things, or even just in-game. It's you now have this title. You've defeated this great and powerful beast, or people know that you have defeated the great and powerful beast, or person, or tyrant, or villain, or hero, or whatever. And you've now got this title, or this accolade, this trophy that will now forever be stained upon you as this particular achievement. And that being said, if it wasn't for the fact that they had the 5 special, up to the 5 special abilities, or even the special, yeah. If it weren't for the fact that they had the special abilities and the immunity to knockout thing, as well as the health, they're honestly not that much more different from mini bosses. Even if you 1v1 them and they lose their special boss health, they still have the factor of you can't knock them out until halfway through their maximum health, and you can't disable their special abilities. Yolkaiger didn't actually have that many, or should I say, Yolkaiger didn't exactly have anything that was all that different. He had, for his special abilities, he just had things where it's he couldn't be knocked out very easily. So he actually had I think he had 3 ability points where he couldn't be knocked out. So even after you broke down into half of his maximum health, you then had to basically get the equivalent of knocking him out 3 times over before he actually did stay down. The other 2 abilities, because again he was Zayton, a level threat, which means that he had 5 ability points because he was at the max point of ability points. The other 2 was one was immunity, a single immunity to nullification. So basically, nullification would not work on him once, and then after that, it could be used on him. And the final ability that he actually got was an activation, just a straight up activation on a willpower ability that I never actually used. Here's the funny thing: I never used a single one of his abilities. That's more of a me thing, but the other reason is because they never really came up. Because no one tried to go, I'm gonna knock him out. Which was good. But yeah, so obviously the reason why we're talking about this is because in the last episode, we actually had it that 2 of the characters did actually fight Yolkaiger, but they swapped in and out for a 1v1. Now, the only reason I did this, the only reason that I didn't have it that he suddenly immediately got to his maximum health is A, it was 1v1 fights, and B, you guys didn't swap out and go, alright, I'll take him on for the rest of this. No. It literally, after Anarchy went down, Cloak was like, right, I'm going to do it. Again, nobody get involved. I'm going to do it. So because
it was
of that,
better for story. It's better for story reasons. I maintain this.
Absolutely. But yeah, so I just wanted to give a bit of context. So I'll open it back up to the rest of this panel, I guess you could say. What makes an interesting boss?
I guess it's like it depends on like the story that you're going with. Like it has to be someone that everyone has a reason to defeat. In my opinion, like if it's just annoying or something, it can't be just sort of like any old random person. There has to be some form of like connection of like, yeah, this one that has to go down.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Are you guys even there?
Wait,
Yeah.
wait, is yeah, you were sorry, you muted.
No. All I was going to say is no, I do agree with that fact. I definitely think, because this is the thing, definitely in the context of a game, that's very important, right?
Yeah.
For the fact that everyone's being there, it's very different when you're writing. I guess I know, because I guess it's kind of the same. There always has to be a reason why everyone has to defeat the boss. And there's so many things you can do for bosses, but I wouldn't say any of them are necessarily important. Like having the boss, or giving a boss, I guess, qualities that you can actually like, can be quite interesting, dependent on the boss. Or reasons that aren't just like, I'm evil for the sake of evil reasonings. Like, because I feel like bosses that always have a hard time sometimes, unless they're like set up to be that way, is just like, I'm going to end the world, or I'm going to do this mass destruction. Why? Because it's in my nature to. Like, you get away with that sort of thing with like demons and stuff, right? Because obviously they're sort of set up to be those sort of entities. But when you do it with more, I guess, mortal-based humanoid sort of people, it becomes very hard for that sort of thing to be there sometimes.
It's almost like as if they're denying the mundanity of the possibility of someone just genuinely upset, and instead it's like, I'm gonna do it because, like...
Yeah, I mean, even higher being like demons and that lot sometimes have a general reasoning why destroying the world is actually a good thing for them.
I mean, the obvious thing is like everyone always goes to this thing of, because I want people to be subservient to me. That's like the go-to. Sorry, Sam, I know that you were itching to say something.
I was going to say, there's always like, I don't want to say the mentally irregular, like people like the Joker.
Yes.
Or like people like that who just like chaotic evil, for a gameplay term. Who just do view the world like that, like, oh, I'm going to destroy things because why not?
I have a concern though. Okay. I have a concern though with what tabletop RPGs is different from like most stories, because, well, I know us anyway. If you make the villain like, well, the boss like, there's something sympathetic about them, or they're doing something for a good reason with bad ways, I know what each of us will probably be sort of like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to fight him.
Okay.
We'll find another way.
That's interesting that you bring this up. Do you guys also feel the same way? Like, if your characters actually found a villain or a person who's supposed to be a villain, you actually find a relatively quite sympathetic reason. Do you think that your current characters potentially would rethink their current strategy against the particular individual?
Current characters.
Yeah, like Anarche, you two, Lily.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean, yeah.
Okay. It depends on how annoying they are.
Yeah, there's a
That's what I mean.
big...
But it's
like
very Sam talking, though.
No, like, yeah, like, it could be sympathetic, but if they're annoying, I'd probably just, like, try and get rid of them still.
Also, there's still, like, lines, like, I don't care how much of a sob story you've got. If you're going over too many lines, I don't really care after a while.
No, you don't understand. He took my last sandwich. That's why I killed his entire family and tortured all these random people.
Well, in that case, I
It's
mean,
like,
to be honest, it
it's
was his
like,
last sandwich.
I lost my daughter, and now I'm going to take everyone else's family to bring her back. It's like, okay, man, look, I get you lost your daughter, but that's just stupid. All right, I'm not.
It's sort of like, the Into the Spider-Verse thing where, like, I absolutely love what they did with the King thing, but it's like, it was really good because it's like you feel his pain that his family is, like, lost and stuff, but he's going to take the entire universe, with him just to see them again. And I'm like, dude, there are other
Yeah,
people in this world besides you,
Yeah,
Like, I'm
you're
sorry
going,
what happened, but come
too
on.
far now. Like, I can feel sorry for you, but I'm still gonna kick your ass because
Yeah.
this is going too far.
So
So
I just remembered another sympathetic that did great evil. Remember, like the very last, remember Spider Carnage in the 1990s Spider-Man. His whole plan was destroying the entire multiverse, and yet you still sympathized with him because
I think though I
yeah,
think it's disproportionate. Like it's the concept of being disproportionate. Like as you said, Kane. Like it's that thing of like if you go too far, if you step over these lines in the sand that you've drawn, it's disproportionate. Like oh, this guy killed my family, so I decided to end the entire world. Like, hang on a second, couldn't you have just killed him and then like called it a day? No, everyone has to suffer. Like, did the entire world cause the death of your family? No. Then why are you doing this? It's kind of the the Dracula conundrum from the Castlevania thing, because it's that thing of like, okay, a lot of these people in that village kind of deserved what they got, considering that he literally said, you have 1 year to basically show me any reason why humanity should live. And they literally laughed in his face. In fact, they actually threw a celebration of his wife's death, and he was like, all right, I gave you... In fact, they even said it's been more than a year, which means that he gave them even more time, and he was like, nah, I'm done, bro. You're all dead. And he just was like, nah, full extermination level event. And I don't get me wrong, like, I don't think that the death of one person equates that, but at the same time, at first, he was only threatening that one town that literally strung her up and burned her to death. So, to some degree, you got to see it from the perspective of, has anyone had their loved one taken from them and literally killed in front of a bunch of people in a really inhumane way, and you've just thought every single person who was ever part of that entire thing needs to suffer? Not necessarily needs to die, but needs to suffer. And it's that thing of, that makes sense, but then his disproportionate retaliation is just, fuck the world, everyone is gonna die.
Yeah.
Even to his own detriment, like, and his own species.
I think that's really good, actually, because it does actually show the consequence of that. I mean, too often in these things, not just tabletop RPGs, but any piece of media where they're showing, like, yes, they've gone too far and stuff, they don't actually show the effects of going too far, whereas, like, in Castlevania, they really go into it. Like, you basically, they show Dracula having a mental breakdown.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
he's like running a kingdom by giving himself this mental breakdown, and like his entire species thrown into chaos because, well, if you kill all the humans, they can't eat anything. So
Yes,
this whole genocide plan, not the greatest idea for vampires.
But this is also where I bring your attention to the fact that none of you guys actually got to find out why Yolkaiger even
Exactly.
did this. And I feel like it's important that I should share that with you.
Yeah, go for it.
So, Yolkaiger is about like Yolkaiger is about like 44 years old. And the idea is that supposedly 22 years ago, he ended up killing the emperor's at the time the current emperor, which is the empress's dad, in front of her at the age of 16. And to get to that point, we have to go back an even further 22 years to the fact that Yolkaiger was born a native to the island of the Land of the Sunken Moon. He was born, and despite the fact that the way that he looks now, he actually didn't have the whole demon fingernails, the sharp horns, or even the scary teeth, or even the weird eyes. He was born, and in the matter of a few days, in fact, a few years, he was larger than every other human. To the point of which, when he got to the age of 15, he was about 6 foot. By the time that he got to the age of 20, he stood at 9 feet tall. He was basically continuously growing. He would eventually become basically 3 meters tall by the age of 20. People feared him. He had strength beyond measure. He could do anything, and he was continuously shunned by the people of the Land of the Sunken Moon. And when he turned 18, he had gotten to such a ridiculous height that he would always have to duck down, he'd always have to do things, but people would shun him and ask him to leave places and basically be really, really harsh to him. And eventually, he would find a master who would eventually lead on to teaching him the ways of the warriors, and actually teach him like willpower. And the main reason for teaching him it was actually to stabilize his emotions, to be able to keep a balance of these emotions. And at the age of 20, he had basically mastered the two different skills of both mind techniques and the body techniques. The spirit techniques and the body techniques. So he had the ability to enhance his entire body even further. The guy had beyond ridiculous levels of strength, and eventually he would become this worker. He was like 9-10 feet tall, and he would carry all of these different things. He would help people out around the village, and people still feared him. They were terrified of him. He even fought back against monsters and other people who would come there and trying to invade, and he would always stop them, including against pirates. The likes of which a few pirates actually were eventually paid to hunt and kill Yol Kiger at the age of 20. From the age of 20 all the way to 22, for 2 years, people were actually paying assassins to try and kill him, and they would continuously fail until when he turned 22. He actually had, by this point, he did actually have a wife and a child, who was an infant.
Oh no, I don't like this.
Infant
I don't like where this is going.
already shown signs of having similar abilities to himself, super strength and super durability. And eventually, he was told that his wife and child had been taken, and it was by none other than the Emperor, and in front of everyone, killed both of them. However, what he actually said was, I want you to be placed on the execution block and killed. If you do this, your wife and your son will be spared. And he did this. He willingly took this upon him. And in the last moments before he was going to be executed, the Emperor said, your child and your wife has already been killed. There is no more scourge upon this earth left. You are the last of your kind, and you will die the last of your kind. Of which, in that moment, the executioner's blade broke, and so did any chance of them killing Yol Kiger. He tore apart the entire palace. He laid waste to a massive area of the capital, and he even then, in front of the Empress's daughter, in front of the Empress, or the princess at the time, he crushed her father's head in his own hand. And when then the guards came, he said, I am not your father. I will not kill a child. And he leaves. But before he fully left, he broke all of the pirates out of all of the pirates and all of the criminals out of the prisons throughout the southern region. And he took them to an island that had been so far basically abandoned due to its due to the fact that just nobody wanted to inhabit just an abandoned island. The island was known as Jotun Island, which obviously is sort of like a reference to giants, as he's a giant anthropial. Eventually, he would become powerful enough that people would be terrified enough of him to claim him to be the world's strongest creature, as he then stated that that place, along with the ocean around it, would be his entire kingdom to rule. People didn't like that very much and kept coming to him and fighting him, to which no avail. He would be absolutely unstoppable for the rest of time until you guys came around. And that is his history, that is his past, and that is why he did the things he did. He hated them
you
so
know
much.
what?
Yeah, go on.
You know what? Fuck Land of the Sunken Moon. I'll say it. I'll straight up say it. We shouldn't have killed him. He was right. That was if I knew that, I'd be sort of like, what? Fuck these guys. Also, like with the Empress, she's like, I will not kill a child and stuff when she grows up. You kind of maybe thinking, maybe my dad was wrong on a few things. It's like, nah, gotta get revenge on this guy who's only after me because my father killed his entire family for no good reason, just prejudice.
Fun fact, she doesn't know that that's what her dad did. She was kept well out of the way, so technically her dad actually threw one extra FU to the grave by basically having it that when he got killed by Yorkaiga, it literally looks like, no context, big man kill daddy. That's literally what happened. She still to this day doesn't know the reason as to why he did that, other than the fact that people didn't like him because they were terrified of him, and rightfully so.
You know what? I think Sam's reaction to the Land of the Sunken Moon was kind of like initially right, actually, because with context, I'm like, if well, maybe not Rakia, because Rakia still wants to redeem herself and stuff like that, so she would be uneasy about it, but she'd still let Cloak flatten him. But if it were actually me, I'd be like, you know what? You're all right, my man. You can absolutely, screw these people who haven't changed at all.
Yeah, but I'll give him, maybe his first set of actions were completely justified. What he did in the 20 years afterward, insanely not.
That's not cool.
Yes, okay, fair enough, you have a grudge against these people, right? But did he just gave up and basically went, nah, I'm just gonna basically make your life hell for 20 years, do the exact same thing that you did to me, which you might call even. I view more as childish, because it's basically holding on to that so much that now you have to inflict it onto the same people instead of just moving on. So, also, he literally went out of his way to break other people out of prison who were probably serial killers, rapists, or what fucking ever, and had them join under him to basically
child killers as well. It's oh boy, child killer Jim is free. Let's go child killing again.
So it's just that sort of thing where it's like, okay, cool, right, your first set of actions may have some form of justification behind them. Everything else, nah, you're pretty much just as bad as them after a while. So,
which is quite literally about the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's that thing of, we believed him to be a monster, and they kind of turned him into one. And the worst part is that the reason as to why he gets the horns and the teeth and the eye is because he goes, they see me as a monster, so I'm going to become the thing that they fear most, which is truly becoming said monster. And that's why all of his crew take on animalistic traits, because they are trying to become less human. They don't look normal. They don't look right. They, they've got the, gorilla arms. Oh, they've got an elephant trunk, or quite literally I didn't actually ever get to mention this, but Rose actually had her skin. You never actually got to see it properly, but from the neck down, all of her skin is strangely coloured because it's supposed to be poison dart frog skin.
Oh. Oh, and
Hence-
so what about? Oh, she also had wings as well, didn't she? So...
No, those were actually made out of a poison. She had a SPMA where she created poison construct wings.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't figure that, because I thought, oh, she's like part dragon or something, like
No.
that. But nah,
But yeah, it was.
no. I mean, yeah, and also like your career after killing an emperor, and no one believes that you were justified in doing it, even though he killed your entire family for like, based on you killing yourself. And then they're like taunting you with it. Like, it's just hard for me to like, to like just treat this guy the same way now, knowing that.
It's like, yeah,
It's
okay.
like,
When you
yeah,
understand,
it's
it's like this guy did react in a completely disproportionate way after, maybe about like a year or so after. Like, as you said, Kane, he's at this point he's just holding them down out of principle. Like he's just continuously doing this stuff out of principle. He is turned into the big bad pirate man because at this point he's just leaning into the whole, yeah, I'm just going to be big, bad, and evil. But that's obviously where sympathy is starting to sort of go a bit of askew. Because look, it's been 20 long years, dude. Like, okay, the first couple of years, I get it, but like, you still hold these people down. And the funny thing is that like, as if you also read into it a bit more, the North are still trying to reach out to other islands, and they're still trying to be good. But the reason as to why that they don't get any help from other islands is not because that they're not interesting. It's because that they're terrified of getting anywhere near Yol Kaiga's area. He's one of the 8 rulers of the sea, and because of that, nobody wants to touch his area, his turf. And because of that, the northern side is always left alone because he doesn't have anything against the northern side. But he also makes his own messengers go out in front of the shores and, on the northern side, and have it that people jump onto the ships and go, hey, look, I'm a pirate from a very big pirate crew, just so that you know that we exist and we're actually members of Yol Kaiga, the strongest creature alive. Yeah, we're just here to let you know, don't go to the southern region because, that would be stepping on our turf, and we can't have that now, can we? And then they obviously dip. And having that just, like, makes everyone just realise, like, unless if we can fight Yol Kaiga, there's no point in us doing this. And you guys came, went, saw, kicked some ass, only to now start realising, oh, these people kind of were really evil in a lot of ways in their older generations, but actually they still haven't learnt any lessons. Mostly because they don't even know what the lesson was that they were supposed to be learning, other than, oh man, that guy was really evil, he killed an emperor.
If anything, all Yol Kaiga did was enforce their previous lessons of not trusting people.
Exactly.
So,
but obviously, because that at no point did he, nor anyone else, inform the rest of the place that the reason why he did this is because the emperor cowardly killed his defenseless family. They captured them and then they killed them. And it's just that factor of, like, because of this, it creates that thing. And obviously we're talking about this now, so I guess it's important that we should bring this up then. Is a boss more mechanic, or are they more important as characteristics? Like, are they more important in the world as characters, or is a boss more defined by the factor of their mechanics?
Depends.
Well, I find that so difficult to answer because, I think they're symbiotic, those two things, because, a boss with just mechanics and no decent story is not compelling enough, and it doesn't feel, like you've achieved anything. You're just pressing buttons at that point.
Sam,
But then again,
oh, sorry.
yeah. But then again, if you have a like great story but the mechanics aren't so good, it can feel really underwhelming.
Fair.
I think that depends on what kind of boss you're building up.
Like, if you're making a comic relief.
Yeah, or if you're doing, say, more of like a politics sort of thing, right? Where like the big bad isn't someone who's actually even a fighter at all.
No.
He's just manipulative. And, actually, here's the best way. Sort of early Sauron and like the Silmarillion, like, yes, he is really strong, but the way he plays his game is more manipulative. He manipulates everyone into sort of becoming evil and changing their views on the world.
He's more corruptive than he is actually taking physical, combative action.
Right, he is insanely strong,
Yes.
but his main force is corruption, not through beating people up. So it's that sort of thing. If you build a villain more like that, I think you can get way more of story. If your villain is more like the Yokaiga scenario, where he's just meant to be big, bad, strong guy, right? I think story is still very important, but mechanics are needed a lot more for that. Because what you're building up for is that big fight at the end.
I was actually going to I was actually going to say, Sam, you said it depends. What do you think it depends on?
What I was going to say is that before he told us, we had no idea, right, what his story was besides he killed the king.
Exactly.
So and to be honest, it was less of a very personal fight. It was more of a kind of on the job thing for us.
An
Because
arcade.
I don't think any of us cared about the Land of the Sunken Moon except maybe Cloak.
Yeah.
As far as I know,
the only reason
none
that
of
you
us
guys
cared.
were there was because that Rakia said, "Hey, there's a monster apparently here."
Oh yeah.
And then
That's
later,
what I
as
mean.
soon as you guys stepped onto that, it was like Cloak was like, "Hey, by the way, I actually come from here, so I'll show you around and stuff." And then later on, it was like, "By the way, a full blown civil war," and then suddenly it just all accelerated to this thing where like, it's like Cloak is like, "I have to kill him."
That's what I mean. Is that none of us cared about the Land of the Sunken Moon? I don't think any of us still care about them and their stupid ways.
I think you did. No, that's the thing. I think Rakia cared because it was her friend's homeland, and
that's what I mean. But like, we only care about Cloak. We don't care about anything we're in here for.
But to be fair, Sam, Utili Lily doesn't care about anything that isn't affecting her. So I mean, you are coming from a biased standpoint. But
does Anakai care about the Land of the Sunken Moon or fighting people that are strong?
Actually, that's a good point. I think
Kane, does Anakai care about the Land of the Sunken Moon?
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think to a degree he does. Like, because I won't say too much from the way I've sort of built Anake in his backstory and the sort of things he's done. I feel like he cares to a degree about the outcome of this, more on the fact of less individual wise and more he doesn't really want to have this like sort of peace that is built up suddenly turn into absolute violence again. Because again, as much as Anake likes fighting, as I described before when you first met him, to him it's more of the way he views fighting isn't a malicious sense in it. It's essentially his way of connecting to people.
Yeah,
and being him.
It's entertainment and exercise. It's competitive exercise.
Yeah, essentially. So like his thing is more like I care for the sake of it's affecting some people I know, but also no one should really have to be living through this, and I don't want this because again, somehow Anarche managed to get some kind of peace to exist. But it's just that sort of thing of he's not a complete fool, and he knows these sort of things can break easily by just like one simple mistake happening again. Because people don't just change in like overnight like that. So
you've also got the fact that Fletcher very much cares about the way of the warrior, and actually does also come from the background of he lost his family and he lost his home. So he at first was like, "Oh, the Land of the Sunken Moon, a great place to meet warriors," and then eventually he kind of got connected with it in the format of, "No, I want this place to thrive. I want these innocent people to be better." So it's less about the Land of the Sunken Moon and the people for it. Again, he became very sympathetic, but also he wanted Yokaido to be defeated because it's Anarche or Cloak's, way of the warrior. That is their warrior's path. So it is at that point, it is less about the Land of the Sunken Moon and more about the people that he's gotten connected to. But it's less that he doesn't care. Like, he definitely has shown time and time again that he does care about the Land of the Sunken Moon. As for Felix, I could argue that Felix is just doing it because he promised to the party and kind of feels bad about the situation with Adriana. Like, I don't think I think if you were to argue anyone who doesn't care about the Land of the Sunken Moon, Utility Lily and Felix, maybe Rakia at best. But
Yeah, I think Rakia. I think this is the weird thing because Rakia likes it in a sort of academic sense because she knows so much about it through like World Traveler and all this sort of thing, and is like fascinated by it in that sense. Talking to people though, the things that happen to her in it, does not like it at all.
Yeah.
It's such a weird thing. It's like, yeah, I could, she could tell you anything about the Land of the Sunken Moon's places, its political intrigue and stuff, and it's like, oh, do you want to go there again? No. It's a place, it's awful.
It's a rich culture full of garbage people.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's just and you know what? My opinion hasn't changed on that. It's a rich culture full of the worst people. You know what? The culture is wasted on them.
You know what's funny? If you guys had stayed in only the northern region, I think actually it would have been better off for you guys. But of course, the whole point of the arc was to go into the southern, region, save them, and make them maybe, hopefully, change their thoughts on superpowered individuals. Whereas, like, if you'd stayed in only the northern region, done some stuff there, I think your opinion of it would be a greatly different. Only because it's like, oh man, these guys are like fight happy. But actually, they're quite honourable, and like, although they like do the whole Ricky Vito thing, a lot of them still do it honourably. Now, yes, you met Rudder, who was a little extreme in the ways that he wanted his beliefs, but the reason for that is more due to his connection with
unable to say, take consent.
He
is the rapist of fighting.
Dude!
To be fair, Sam, no, because you have been attacked multiple times, and at no point did you ever use that excuse, so no.
Anyway, whenever someone asks you and they say no, it's like, I'm going to fight you anyway.
I mean, yeah, but what if someone doesn't ask you and they just fight you anyway?
What,
you see what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I just think that it's just. It's.
I guys have a bias against the Land of the Sunken Moon.
Just because that you're salty, Sam. Like,
You know what? It would have been okay, Sam, if you weren't having a character moment.
Yeah,
this is the thing.
I didn't have a character moment that just kind of went nowhere.
That is not the teachable moment. The teachable moment is don't try and make a character moment that you don't know where the end is. Like,
I did know where the end was.
No, you didn't.
It was literally going to last one more thing. It was going to last 3 things.
You were stuck in your ways, and you wanted something.
3 sessions.
You were stuck in your ways.
We had 3 sessions,
and
it was 2 sessions.
Sam, you could not say anyone else had a good idea, because as soon as they tried to do something, you're like, no, that's not the thing that I wanted. And you even said at the end of what happened to your character, you said, I don't know how I would have changed it anyway. You said that to all of us. So you can't now do the same thing that Alex did, was like, Warhead was a pacifist. You can't retroactively tell us, oh, you had a plan. You didn't. Move on.
I had an outline, not a plan.
That's worse. Have a plan next time if you're going to do that. Or at least, if you do have a character moment, let the world around you help build it, rather than just go, no, it's not what I wanted, and therefore your thing isn't going to work. Yeah. Because I want to point out...
For one thing, you have to at least have one moment where you say no to a fight. That's the thing.
Yes.
You had to give me a moment to say no.
And that was a building moment. That was a character building moment. You didn't.
You said, no, screw it, Sam, you're having a fight right now because I tell you. That was the moment you decided upon, where I can't say, no, I don't want to fight Joe. Okay, Sam, you're fighting now because I said so.
But to be fair, Sam, I literally gave you the reason for that. Like, you know the reason for it. Because...
But that's what I'm saying in return. When you said, have a plan, let the world change, I was like, I wanted one moment to say no.
No, I'm not talking about mine. Okay, we're gonna get the filters off then. Okay, I'm not talking about mine. I'm talking about when Alex decided it with Rakia, and you were just like, yeah, I'm not gonna have this. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna be adamant and stuck in my ways and not do anything. And I think Rakia and Alex were right. I don't care how much everyone's like, oh no, that was a mistake of the natural 20, and it was a few lapse in judgment. No, I think it was a perfect plan. It's just that you were just too metagamey to actually do anything about it. Moving on.
Moving on to the point that you actually asked me about the depends
Okay.
of boss fights. Well, it depends on because as you know, I've been playing Mega Man recently,
Okay.
and there's a lot of boss fights in it, but a lot of them don't really have much story to them.
Fair.
But they're nonetheless very challenging boss fights because each of them have you have to challenge, you have to have very different challenges to them,
They're
very different ways of
difficult,
defeating them.
but they also
Yeah.
have gimmicks to them.
Exactly, and there are mini bosses that are just robots but bigger, and they also have their own, but they have less of a story to them.
Yeah, they're just here now, and now you fight this
Yeah.
thing for a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just this giant robot with arms that shoots lasers at you.
It's just a
that
giant
is it.
fly copter.
Yeah, and then there's it's Flash Man or Blast Man or something Man. That's oh, okay. Why is this? Oh, because Dr. Wily, the evil guy, has made them evil. Okay.
Because
That's the thing, though.
Then-
That's the thing,
yeah.
though. They're still compelling because they've got mechanics that are really challenging. I think that's the
Exactly.
difference between the gaming thing and any other form of media is that it does kind of save it a little bit. They could have a boss which is basically defeated, basically just a straw man boss. A man made of straw, but oh my god, he's actually got lasers, and oh my lord, he can fly. And it's defeating him becomes fun, even though there's nothing to them, which is I think unique for the genre. You can save it like that.
Actually, and there's one of my favorite boss fights is purely story. It's from because it's actually just a very funny boss fight. It's like Spider-Man 2, the Mysterio boss fight, where Mysterio's in the game for a bit beforehand, and he does a lot of things like changes the Statue of Liberty to look like him, and it's a big whole section. And then eventually you find him, and the next time you see him, he's just robbing a grocery store, and how low he's gone down. And then whenever the fight starts, you see his health gauge, and it goes 3 or 4 different colors. It's going to be an epic boss fight. And then after one punch, it all goes down, and he flies backwards, and his helmet breaks. Technically, that's a boss fight. It was a very, very, very quick one with 0 to no mechanics, but it was very funny and story based. Because now, that's what happened to him.
So I think it goes off of roughly what you were saying then, Kane, which is it really depends. Because as you said, you could have someone who's very manipulative that could control, as similar to literally, as a culmination of the two things. You could have a manipulative illusionary character or a manipulative any type of character, but just the whole Mysterio thing, it's I am this great powerful evil, and then one hit and they're down because the whole point is their big scary ability is, or their big scary thing is, they're very political, they're very capable with illusions, they're very tricky and sneaky, and they're great at making illusions, and it becomes that whole point of it's the story that's telling us that this is the boss, but it's the mechanics that are reminding us that the whole point of this boss is how much control they have around us, and literally how much power they actually really have.
Yeah, I mean, it also depends as well, because there's a big difference between just having a boss and then having your big bad, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because you could be, but I think even then, a good something that's always, I feel somewhat important is the setup, right? Because you could be I don't know, delving down into some sort of cave work, and the deeper you get, the more you start hearing things or seeing certain things, right? And then you get to a point, and boom, there's the boss. But then at the same time, I also think a boss by surprise is also pretty good, right? But normally, even then, to most bosses, there's some sort of setup to get your mind sort of ready for it, right? And I feel for your big bad, that's particularly important. before you even get to the fight is how you set them up.
Mm.
How have you managed to set them up to the point where it actually intimidates the group to a point where they view them as this big threat?
Yes, yeah. I think also going back to it as well, like I know that obviously like we've spent a lot of time talking about like the current boss that we've talked about. I would actually like to do a separate episode on this at some point due to the time restraints. But I'd love to do an episode where we actually talk about the history of bosses, like the bosses that we've faced before in either this campaign or actually just in previous campaigns in both D&D and Animite Dells, where we talk about the different bosses that we've faced and stuff like that. Because I think that would be a really cool sort of thing to talk about, like all of the different times that we've actually seen a boss with a different mechanic that works quite nicely. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I quite like the system that we built here, because that like a boss could have something as obvious as they've got super strength, they're really powerful and strong. Like obviously the whole point of Yolkaiger is he's supposed to be an unstoppable force that when you beat him makes everyone realize he's not invincible. The champions are all supposed to be special types of bosses that have that concept of, one must have a better mind or a better capability of fighting. But really, Yolkaiger was just supposed to be, this is pure power. Like if you don't have this level of power, you're not getting past him. You're not beating this boss fight. And there are other boss fights, then there are other powers that just make certain aspects of the game very obvious. Like, we're supposed to just hit them until they go down. But other ones are like, this character has abilities that we're completely unaware of how they work, and even how we can stop their effects from happening. And it's probably one of the reasons why I think boss fights are so interesting, so odd. Because, I mean, one campaign we did it where, like, you literally had to fight a giant snake made out of slime. And all of you found out pretty quickly that you couldn't fight it without doing some kind of elemental or special damage, because it was immune to physical and spatial damage. And so Bill had to make weapons for one of the characters that was infused with like elemental damage so that it could be wielded by the strongest character. Then you playing as Warhead, you had to have it that you had like shooting out of your hands incendiary explosives, so that then instead of doing physical damage, it was only fire. And you had to keep getting the higher rolls to do so that you could get them to do that. So it's that thing of, we have to keep hitting them with these things. We have to keep doing this different type of damage. And it became dangerous because there were certain characters that could be hurt by fire, but some of your friends could actually resist fire, physical damage. And it just became this thing where like everyone had to, figure out what kind of things that they could do or had to do to fight this thing, because it had such an annoying immunity and stuff like that. And it became like, how do we think this out? One of my favorite ways that you did this is one of the characters who couldn't fight it started digging a hole until they eventually found water, and were just like, all right, get out of the way, flew back up, grabbed them, and slammed them into the hole. But it was only enough water to like basically ruin a chunk of the body. And it turns out that it was actually the main slime body was like 10 meters, but it made itself like up to 30 meters long because it was creating extra slime. So it's like, okay, well, I've just gotten rid of like 5 meters of slime. This is still nothing. This thing is going to still keep coming at us. So eventually it was just like, oh, okay, well, it can't take damage from my attacks, but if I punch it hard enough, I can actually make the entire chunk of it just fly away. And if I just throw enough of it around, it will be torn apart into separate pieces. And then like we can focus on the smallest piece and just deal damage to that if it starts moving, because the main piece is the piece that is actually alive, and the other pieces are just stuff that it controls around it as like extra padding and armor. So it was just this really cool concept that that was able to be created. Around the system, where instead of having it where it's like, oh, we have to hit it as hard as we can, the characters actually have to think. It's like, oh, this character has invisibility. How do we stop that? Oh, this character is immune to physical damage. How do we stop that? And I just really love that. It's also one of my favorite ones was I think it might have been with you, Kane, where you guys at one point had to fight a teleporter, and at one point you just electrified you electrified a fence so that they tried to teleport and they actually slammed against the fence because teleporters can't teleport if there's basically something that is electrified in the way of their teleporting location. And you use that as like a way so that they couldn't escape, and eventually like that was how you did it. Like you basically kept tasing him. And I was like, well, hang on a second. If he can't teleport through electrified stuff, what if I just electrocute him and keep on electrocuting him? Like, keep tasing him. At that point, he then basically can't use his powers, right? And then that's how you guys were able to figure it out.
I would like to say one thing about that, actually. That kind of, like, complicates but also improves, the boss system in Animite Tales. Is that certain powers, it doesn't matter how powerful you are, you can't get around certain powers easily. And some powers are just, entirely incompatible.
Yes.
And I think that is something worth considering as well. Like, I think this has also been the thing about some mini-bosses being more difficult to defeat than the main bosses, is because they had, like, trickier and more sort of interesting powers, where... Like, I'm thinking of the 24-hour campaign we had with this guy. I think he was a husk, I think, and like he sort of just adapted to whatever he was killed by the last.
He had Animite beams, which basically meant because all of us were superhumans or husks or anomalies.
Exactly.
It basically shredded through our health. Then he had adaptive regeneration. And I think he also, I could be wrong, I think he had mutation control or he had environmental. But yes, no, his final ability was essentially a resurrection that made him immune to whatever killed him.
Yeah, that was a surprise. That was like the thing that fight sticks in my mind a lot because it was so interesting in comparison to like his main. The main boss who we didn't have too much trouble doing. But it's the fact that we killed this guy, and after a while, he just walks up to us again. And it was like, oh, no, round 2, no! It wasn't round 2, thankfully.
I think
because
my
we absolutely,
part of that was that like everyone was like, okay, we know that the last time we hit him or hurt him, when he regenerated, he then took less damage. And the way that he'd been killed was literally being like pounded into the ground until he was squashed and just mulch on the floor. So it's that thing of like, okay, we know that he's not immune to being electrocuted. We know that he's not immune to be... But that basically means that he's immune to the most common damage type in the entire game, which is blunt force. Which means he now can't be... Not only can he not take damage, but he also can't be killed by blunt force-based attacks. And considering that the strongest one on your team at the time was a super strength user with incredible power for blunt force attacks, it was like, shoot, our strongest guy is now completely out of commission. And
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that was more compelling because we did actually have to think about how to do it. But then it was like at the end of it, we just killed this guy, and like now he's like immune to biological attacks. Which, in a way, is worse. He's be difficult to kill for a biological manipulator, at least. I'm not entirely sure what that meant. But yeah, I guess you could just punch him in the head now. Because no longer immune to blunt force, I suppose.
Yeah, but that was also before we had entirely given up and wanted to die in real life. So there was also an ounce of care for, well, at least it was me before my caffeine overdose kicked in.
That is true. Yeah, I must say that was something that I learnt, is that I am not in my early 20s anymore. and I need sleep.
I hate staying up late in general. I do not enjoy it. I don't know why I accepted the idea in the first place, but
I think it's because we all came to that thing of like, oh, okay, we'll try it because why not? And then after a certain point, we were like, this was a bad idea. We're done. But yeah, I would say to end this on a high note, I guess we could say, is next time we actually do get a chance to talk about bosses, we'll probably have to talk about the actual proper history of bosses that we've faced, and also talk a little bit about like certain other aspects of things that we've talked about using this in bosses and stuff like that. Because also
part 2 confirmed.
Part 2 confirmed? Question mark? Exclamation mark?
Yeah.
Ampersand.
But thank you very much for everyone for listening. Those of you who are wanting to learn more about bosses in tabletop RPGs, there are many different places that you can check these out. But of course, keep an eye out for any of the Animite Tales dev plays, where we continue to play through a campaign that I'm currently calling The Crucible of Avarice, where these guys play through a world where the entire planet is now in a global tournament for supremacy of physical combat. Make sure that you definitely check us out on Twitter at Animite Tales. Obviously, check us out on YouTube at Animite Tales on YouTube. And of course, we do in fact have the open beta, which is all on the Animite Tales website. If you would like to have a look at it, if you like playing tabletop RPGs, definitely have a look at it. But always remember, it is an open beta, and I am basically writing this mostly on my own. So remember that not everything is going to be as easily readable as D&D. But if you have any feedback that might be able to help us move on, or even if there's even something that you would like us to do, please let us know in the comments below. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful night.
Bye.
See you in the future.
So is that just your thing now? Or?
That's always been my thing.
Yeah.
I mean, literally from episode 1. Ciao for now!